everyone, it's Raina. So this video is if you have your sun in Virgo and Aries rising. Wow, what a difference. You're talking about the sun and earth energy, and in Virgo, ruled by Mercury, which is very cerebral, and the earth is dry, so there's kind of like that um what we would call detached, sort of analytical nature. And then you have this fiery rising sign that in Aries that is ruled by Mars, and that's the god of war. So actually, your ruler is the ruler of your rising sign. So you are ruled by Mars. So definitely, you cannot be thought of as completely detached. There's always, and you're not like completely analytical all the time, because sometimes you might be quite quick to act, maybe rash even, and it goes against your Virgo nature for sure. And the sun is something that we would definitely put at the center of influence, but we can't ignore that the rising sign can be very influential. And I would say, especially for the first 30 years of life, before you have your first Saturn return, I think that the rising sign can really lead the way, that can relate to how you grew up, what your childhood was like, and you kind of grow into that more um, sensible and measured kind of a person. And this forms an inconjunction, which is a 150-degree angle that is considered an awkward angle. And that is, if it is within that particular degree span. And what they say about this combination of points is that it will mean that it will these two that this contact has nothing in common. Angles are when two planets, or in this case, two points, come together, and the kind of energy that they generate, or the influence that they yield through their contact. So, like for instance, a trine would be a very cooperative angle, and so the planets conspire to achieve something, depending on what two planets or points are connected. Well, the sun and the rising sign would really be about who you are and your sense of self-expression. Your rising sign that can give an it can give other people an idea of who you are, at least that first impression, and it's how you behave in social situations. So when you have an inconjunction, it can create a bit of a disjointed impression that others have, like they can't make heads or tails about you. I have this myself because my sun is in Sagittarius, and I have Taurus rising. But again, I have it within the same degree span. So it's not just about having these two signs, but the degrees that they occupy of each of these points. And so you may dress differently than you really identify as, and that gives kind of a skewered impression that others have, and they can jump to conclusions sometimes because of it. So, for instance, let's say, I mean, this is kind of offbeat of me to say this. Let's say that you have a nose ring and a bunch of tats. I'm not saying that that's necessarily Aries rising, but Aries can be very rebellious and things like that. And yet you work in a bank and you just consider yourself very kind of like a practical and more of a conservative person, people will naturally jump to the conclusion that you are more rebellious. And you're just scratching your head and saying, why can't they see that I'm really quite conservative and blah, blah, blah? Well, have you looked in the mirror lately? But the other thing, too, is that if you do have, like, let's say you have a late degree of Virgo, so you're close to the cusp of Libra, and an early degree of Aries as your rising sign, it could actually form an opposition. And I've seen this where, it can be in like not the signs that oppositions or, any of these angles typically are, but because of the degree of the sun and the other, degree between the two planets or the 2 points, it can create that angle. And the funny thing about that is that you could have some of the same themes where it's almost like being at cross purposes, the way that you really are and how you dress, how you carry yourself. So the themes may be similar regardless. But anyway, in a certain sense, it really doesn't matter because these signs are so different. It's going to generate the same effect. So I kind of spent the last 5 minutes getting back to square one. The rising sign is the cusp of the first house, and the first house is the house of the self. Now, I can argue that the self with the capital S is not the body, definitely, and not how you, um, carry yourself or how you behave when you're with other people. But because this is astrology, and astrology, we could say, is still behaving like we're in the matrix, then that is how people view the self, is like the person that they're looking at and how they're behaving. So um, with Aries rising, this can be somebody who is very has a lot of energy, maybe energy to spare, to the point where you might even be hyperactive. And if you're, if, I was going to say, if you're on the younger end of things, um, because when I was growing up in the 70s, they had no such term as ADD or ADHD. ADHD is the hyperactivity. ADD is just like with the mental kind of inability to focus. But when you have that kind of physical thing where you're always squirming, you can't sit still. They didn't have that when I was a kid, but does that mean that it didn't exist? Of course not. But I do think that it's more prevalent nowadays, and there are different reasons for that. Not going to go into it, or maybe the last 20 years. Computers, technology can be one of those reasons. Lack of exercise in public schools, lack of recess, and all of that kind of thing. But anyway, you may have been diagnosed with that. Now, one of the things that is, me being, being a moon in Virgo and going on this, critique of our society, modern society, is that if you do have um, Aries rising, it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you if you have a lot of energy. It just means that you may need to find a way to discharge that energy more than the average person. So you may be more physical. You may need a lot of exercise. What a revelation, Stop the presses, right? And actually, to tell you the truth, somebody with the sun in Virgo, I would say, is high strung. So that's more of a nervous system thing where you're just like really, you might have a tendency to be easily jarred, but even anything that's stimulating, it might affect you more. It might be mental, where you tend to be a worrywart, nervous energy kind of thing. So this is, the perfect storm for somebody that is very, very like that physically and mentally. And so that's another thing that those two signs may have in common. But I also think that they have in common that they're very um, hardworking. And Aries is ambitious, and it also has that physical stamina. And then you have, with the sun in Virgo, a desire to be industrious, a desire to be productive. So it's a great combination for that. Don't listen to naysayers who talk about inconjunctions and all of that stuff, because you can always find something good about combinations, even if they do have weird um, influences, as they produce a weird influence as well. So this can be somebody who is very progressive or liberal. Um, I think I said something about being conservative. I really don't think that Virgo is a conservative sign. I'm just talking about it being part of the earth element. And I really feel that people who are earth signs tend to be, because they are practical, they tend to be more cautious, and they don't just do things on a whim. But we're talking about, when I'm talking about being liberal or progressive, I'm not even talking about a political party. I'm talking about, you might gravitate towards a certain political party thinking that they, support that belief system. But I'm talking about being liberal means that you have more of an allowance for people, places, and things not to fit into this narrow little box. And so Aries is a fire sign, so it's expansive. So fire signs tend to be very liberal. They tend to, that's, it can be also being very self-indulgent. That's, a form of rebellion. Is not, or even being what, yeah, self-indulgent can be too much of a good thing. Conservative means conserving everything, conserving resources, not overspending, in other words. Fire signs can spend like water if they want to, because they're just very, they're, you could say they're undisciplined, but they just are very spontaneous. They like to live in the moment. And sometimes even you could characterize it as being kind of childish or immature. Again, I'm a sun in fire, I'm a sun in Sag with the moon in Virgo and Taurus rising. So I can tell you firsthand what that's like. So you may experience this yourself with this combination Virgo, but as you get older, you probably will tend to be more like the Virgo. It depends. Depends what your inner planets are like. Your inner planets can be, um, you may have fire with the Leo, like Mars and Leo, but you may have Mars and Libra, and that would make you, both of those signs might be more free spending. If you're if you, for instance, if you have Mars in Cancer, or these inner planets in Cancer or Virgo, then you might be more fiscally conservative and less inclined to do those things. And maybe even more conservative in other ideas. It all depends. But in general, I would say with the Aries rising, there can be that tendency to be, kind of like a playful spirit, more spontaneous than the average Virgo. Although I have to say, because Virgo is ruled by Mercury, it can be very changeable. So it's not going to be like a Taurus, which is a fixed sign, or a Capricorn, which is ruled by Saturn and very, I was going to say very disciplined, but it can be very rigid. And it's like, okay, you do this, you do that, don't do this, don't do that. So, this can be somebody who is very creative for a Virgo person, because the fire energy tends to be very creative. Now, what you create may be a business, may not be a song, it may be a business. And this would actually be a very good combination for that, because cardinal energy likes to be self-directed. It doesn't like to take orders. Um, Virgo rules the sixth house in astrology, and it's about service to others. And Virgo is a sign of the servant. I laugh because I said this in one of my videos with Virgo, and I got some complaints because some Virgos didn't take very kindly to being called a servant, because I guess they had inner planets in Leo, and they were arrogant, and they thought that they were beneath being a servant. But a servant is a beautiful thing. A servant isn't a slave. A servant is somebody who is offering themselves up as, in a way, you could say it's almost like a sacrificial energy, but it's not in a victim mentality. It's like saying, I want to improve the quality of somebody else's life, and I'm a great manager, and I can help this wealthy person manage their life. And so, not surprisingly, somebody who is a Virgo has great ability to organize in general. But because Virgo rules the sixth house of work and service, it's not uncommon for Virgo people to work for others, because you're a mutable sign, and you're not like, you don't have this attitude, of needing to be the center of attention or to be a boss. A mutable sign doesn't need to be in a position of authority. You may actually shy against it, quite frankly. But because you have this influence of Aries, and Aries is a cardinal sign, that may change things. And also, if you have inner planets in Leo, for instance, or even Cancer is a cardinal sign, and that might affect things. But especially, I think Leo is a sign of leadership. So, for instance, if you have Mars in Leo, you may just naturally gravitate towards positions of authority, and that will harmonize, possibly the Mars to the ascendant, and make you, very smoothly, the actions you take put you in that position. And so what type of work would you find yourself in? Well, obviously, the rising sign, I don't typically, I've been bringing it into the equation, but I do life path readings for people who are interested in them. And I look at a lot more than, just the sun sign. And I really don't actually look at the rising sign to determine that. Because, truth be told, having Mars as your ruler could make you gravitate towards dangerous situations, and that could include your occupation. So, somebody who becomes an EMT, or what used to be called a paramedic, where it's a life and death situation and accidents and things like that, or even a cop, a soldier. The only reason that I'm expressing a little bit doubt about those kinds of things is that Virgo people, I think they're not necessarily. Um, I don't want to say that you're timid, but I just don't know how many of you would favor those kinds of occupations that are very active. But it is a possibility, because Virgo is an earth sign. So anything that you're doing that is dealing with these systems in our society, I could see you kind of gravitating towards. And if you're looking for that excitement, you might not want a desk job, because I honestly think that some of you would be happier than a pig in slop, to be in an office, maybe even in a cubicle. That wouldn't bother you, where somebody else. See, the Aries energy makes you very restless sometimes. So that's the only reason that I think that I might be wrong about that. That you have to be on the move, and so maybe even doing physical work that perhaps requires precision, like being, if other factors support it, and you're just like somebody who likes to work with their hands, a construction worker, a carpenter, a even like a janitor or someone, who, because Virgos are very into cleaning, uh, to the point of OCD sometimes. I actually had a woman. I used to work in a health food store. That's another thing that Virgos are into: natural foods and natural healing. And I was working in a health food store, and this uh, repeat customer, the regular customer would come in, and she told me she was a janitor, and she did not look like she was. First of all, women you don't usually associate with being a janitor, but she looked like she could be a teacher or something. Just the way that she was speaking to me, and not to sound um, like snobbish or anything at all, but I just did not think of it. And she goes, I have to do something physical. I cannot just sit still and do things like that. And I know, because my partner's the same way, and he's very intelligent, but he has to do physical work, and that's the thing. So the reason I'm emphasizing that is because your sun sign, which you can also speak about your ruler, is Mercury. So you naturally gravitate towards the field of education, but you may find that you are too antsy to actually, you know, sit behind a desk and be a teacher. If you are something like that, then it might be more of the higher education, where you can teach a class, or maybe even the high school, but you can teach a class and then you have downtime and you can do your own thing, and you have more time to be able to walk around, and you're not just stuck like in one room all day long, in other words, like you would be in an elementary school type of a setting. So that's kind of what I was referring to. But the healthcare field, for sure, some of you may naturally want to be there, but again, maybe an ER nurse or something along those lines, where there's this crisis mode and you have to kind of think on your feet and things like that. That might be very appealing to you. And actually, those kinds of environments, sometimes I know that when they're in surgery, they have to, work hours at a time and be on your feet, and that's something that you might excel at. But in any case, in terms of love, in terms of relationships, this is a combination that you may find that you enjoy your freedom, because um, Virgo is not like a very romantic sign. It's a very practical sign, and unless you have like Venus in Libra or something like that, um, you may be married to your work. You may be just somebody who's a late bloomer in that regard. Aries rising, Mars, you may have a lusty side to yourself, and because Virgo's an earth sign, that certainly could be a combination where you jump into something very quickly, but then you may regret it, for sure. So um, if Aries is the cusp of your first house, that means Libra is the cusp of your seventh, which is the house of relationships. So, in that sense, you may be very um, romantic, but whether or not it translates into a long term relationship, which is what the seventh house is all about, is a different story. And because you're on the move all the time, it may be hard to pin you down. It may be hard for you to find the time, because you may be like doing so many things, active, involved in so much, that just dating and pouring your energy into another person is something that is a challenge for you. But as you get older and that earth energy is kicking in more, you may decide that you want to have a a long-term relationship. So that could certainly happen at some point. Um, and for a person like you, that type of person, you may attract fire signs because you come across as fiery, or even air signs by extension. But depending on if you know, being a Virgo, and if you have inner planets in Cancer, for instance, um, you may feel this sense of frustration, because you might be more traditional, you might be more, you have your head screwed on quite a bit, and you can't understand why the people that you tend to be, tend to attract are more flighty, are more, they might be exciting, but they may not be the type of person that you really can count on necessarily, at least when you want to count on them. And so it's important to really know these different parts of yourself and to find some kind of way to determine whether somebody is a good catch for you, because um, being your sun being ruled by Mercury, you need that intellectual rapport, and also if you have inner planets in Virgo and or Libra, because they're both intellectual signs. And with Libra, the appreciation of the arts can even kick in there. So that kind of part of yourself is also coupled by the love of action, maybe sports. Maybe you're a big sports nut, or you like to do a lot of athletic things. And being an earth sign, the body is a big part of it. So you might like to work out. You may want somebody who is involved in this as well as you. In other words, not a couch potato. So, but at the same time, somebody who has a brain in their head that you can actually have um, interesting conversations with. You're probably going to be a lifetime learner, and you need that kind of person who is not just stagnant, but because you might have that lustful part of yourself, you may be attracted to the physical to an excessive degree. Venus and Libra can make a person attracted to somebody's looks instead of more important things. But all in all, this can be very good. I think this can especially be good for success in career matters, and even sometimes with health, because you're going to be very health conscious and also very, very into the physical in terms of working out and things like that. Okay, that's what I have for you. I hope that this resonated. If you would like a private reading, the link is below. Take care. Bye.